Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ariane, and you are on my channel Neptune and Serenity. And today, as you can see from the title, we are reading Jimin's astrology natal chart. Okay, so this is very interesting. It's very exciting. I've had the idea to do this kind of video for a while now because I love both BTS and astrology very much. And I kind of thought, why not combine these passions? And since I love both of them, I have, of course, personally kind of looked into the charts of the BTS members in the past. And because I know astrology, I know what they mean and I can kind of dive deep into them on my own. But then I thought, like, there's probably going to be a lot of armies out there who would be interested in this kind of information. And it's just fun, it's entertaining, right? So, a bit about me. I am a professional astrologer. I'm also a hair reader and life coach, but I've been practicing astrology professionally for a little bit now. And I'm a self-taught astrologer. Okay, I kind of learned from a bunch of different. There's many different ways to become an astrologer. There's not necessarily like one certificate or program you have to do, but my approach was more to kind of learn a bunch of things from a bunch of different sources and different astrologers and different courses, and of course my experience working with people and actually reading people's charts. And in terms of BTS, I have been an ARMY since 2014. So it's been a while now. So yes, I kind of know them quite well. I love them very much, of course, as much as you, I'm sure. Um, I I will say though, like in the most recent few years, I've been quite busy and I don't necessarily keep up with every single thing they do, or that they put out in terms of shows or whatever, but I still love them just as much. And I, of course, keep up with their music and still listen to it regularly. Okay, so if there's something that I'm like during the reading, I'm like, oh, he could be like this or he could do this. And he said it before in an interview and I just didn't know it or didn't catch that or don't remember it. That is possible. Okay, I wanted to say that. So in a minute or so, I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to look at his chart together and dive really deep into it. This video is probably going to be very long because when I talk about astrology, I can go on and on kind of forever. But I know there are people who are going to be interested in that. So yeah. But before we do that, I just want to do like a couple of disclaimers about what astrology is, what it isn't, what it can be used for, what it can't be used for, and also just talk a bit about like the ethics of doing a video like this. You know, doing a reading of a birth chart of someone who isn't personally there to consent to it, like my take on that, and just a few food for thought, right? So please watch this part as well. Okay, so the first thing, I'm also doing this because like I think some people might watch this video and find this and they don't know much about astrology, if at all, if anything at all. So I wanted to clarify that. But even if you do know about astrology quite a bit, I would suggest you watch this part still because I'm kind of talking about my own take and how I use astrology. So first thing that's really important to know about astrology is that it is not deterministic. And what that means is that astrology does not control your life. It does not define you, it does not define your life. It's not because you have this sign or this placement that it means this will happen to you with 100% certainty, or you will have this character trait with 100% certainty. And the reason for that is that every single sign, every single aspect that can be had in a natal chart is very complex. It can show up many different ways, and we have free will still. So there is kind of like a healthy and a more shadow side to every single sign, every single aspect. Your natal chart is essentially just kind of the potential and the possibilities and the energy that you're given in this lifetime, and what you do with that is partly within your control. Okay, so we're going to explore the different possibilities of that. But there's nothing necessarily that I'm going to say that is going to be like 100% certainty that it's happened to him or that he is like this personally, because we know of him, of course, but we don't know him personally. So I wanted to make that clear as well. That is always the case with astrology. And your birth chart does not define you, you define it. Also very important. Yeah, and all this talk about free will and nuances is also the same reason why like having certain placements will not make you like a good or a bad person, because you choose how you use your birth chart, and you choose whether you do good or bad things. And also, we're all nuanced, complex human beings. No one is 100% good or 100% bad or anything like that. So we're not going into that realm at all. I know some people talk about that with astrology. That's not at all my approach. And that's not usually the approach of any person who says they are a professional astrologer, because we know better. So my approach is kind of more psychological in terms of like self-development, self-awareness, also spiritual because I am spiritual, and empowering. I always say that I practice empowering astrology. I do astrology because I love humans, and astrology speaks of humans and humanity. And I love reading people's charts because it just confirms things or verbalizes things that they've experienced their whole life, that they feel it is who they are, and also gives them tools to understand themselves better, or maybe make their dreams come true, or help them through any challenges that they may have, because those will show up in the birth chart. Okay. In terms of the ethics of doing a reading like this, it is not like, it's kind of murky waters, I guess, because like there aren't necessarily any kind of saying of like, oh, doing an astrology reading for a celebrity who is alive is ethical or not ethical, because a lot of people don't really know much about astrology or don't even like believe in it. But in terms, yeah, because the thing is, like, celebrities, like, they do have things about themselves that are more public than other people, and they kind of know that that's part of like the deal of being a celebrity, and that includes their birthday, which is like what we use for the natal chart. But a lot of them don't necessarily know that if we have the birthday, we can pull up their chart, and so we don't know if they would actually agree with that. But to remain kind of ethical, I do want to say, like, there's some things that I'm not necessarily going to talk about in this chart. And what I mean by that is that the natal chart really speaks of like your entire life, and there can be things in it that are like really personal or really private or difficult to talk about, even in like a one-on-one meeting with an actual client, right? And I'm not even going to say what those things are, because I think some people might watch this and not even know that you can find out those things in a birth chart. And if I say them, some of you might be like, oh, you can find that out, I'm going to Google it anyway. But certain areas of life or things that, and again, even if I did talk about it, I would have no certainty, as we said earlier. But there's just some things that I'm going to like not necessarily mention, that I feel would be like too, I would be like prying on his privacy, and that would be weird. And this is also like, yes, we're going to dive deep into his chart, but like this is also like just for entertainment. Okay, so those were my disclaimers for that. So thank you for watching that. Now we're going to share my screen and we're going to get into the reading. Okay, just going to do a full screen. There you go. Okay, great. So here we have it. So we have Jimin here, born on October 13th, 1995 in Busan, South Korea. And I want to address this as well, the time of birth. So this time of birth is one that I found a couple years ago. I don't know when I Googled like BTS time of birth of the members, and I did get like a result. I don't remember where it was from, but it wasn't directly from BTS. It wasn't mentioning where they might have said that. So it's kind of, it could be wrong, essentially. Okay, it could be wrong. But I personally think that it makes sense with the chart, and that was the only time of birth that I found. But it could be wrong. And if it was wrong, what could potentially change is the rising sign right here, and which houses the planets are in. Okay, the signs the planets are in and the aspects between the planets would not change. Okay, and if we ever like, if they ever confirm their birth times and it's different than what I have here, I can make another video about it, honestly, with the right chart. But I think with Jimin here, it's one of the members where I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. So we're going to read the chart as if like the birth time is correct, but I still wanted to say like, it could be wrong. I could be wrong. Okay, so for those of you, this is like the zodiac wheel, and inside here, like these are like the planets, and they're in the signs or on the wheel here. And you're gonna understand more as we go into it, okay? So as we know, he is a Libra sun, and I'm starting with him in these videos because it was his birthday like 2 days ago from when I am like recording. So happy birthday, Jimin. Happy solar return. So he has Sun in Libra, Moon in Gemini, and then Cancer rising. So he has both his sun and his moon in air signs. Also, another little thing I will say, like I might refer to the sun and the moon as planets, even though I know that they're not astronomically, right? They are luminaries, I know that, but they work similarly to other planets in astrology, and astrologers used to call them planets before we knew that they were luminaries and not planets. So I know they're not planets. I'm just saying if I refer to them as such, that's why. It's not because I'm dumb or I don't know. Okay, so with these big three, right, which is what the sun, moon, and rising are, with these big three, there is a lot of feminine energy in both the Libra sun and the Cancer rising, which is why when I saw Cancer rising, well, I think at first I was like, oh, really? And then I was like, I thought about it and I was like, oh, actually, that makes so much sense because the rising sign means and represents many things, but one of them is your first impression of this person. And I will say, I think it's more your first impression of them, like when you actually meet them in real life. If you were to meet them in real, I've never met him in real life. Um, Maybe some of you who are watching have. Congratulations. But yeah, I think this might be more like in real life, and his like first impression of like online or like personality, persona, and reputation could be more his midheaven, which we're going to talk about later. But Cancer rising here, this is a rising sign that is very like soft, that is very kind, that is very sweet, and that's how they appear at the first time as well. Okay, in terms of physical appearance, they can have kind of like round faces and chubby cheeks, something that I am a Cancer rising as well, so there's that. But yeah, and well, there have been moments when he's had chubby cheeks and moments when he hasn't, but even then I thought that was kind of like a fun like link there. But yes, if you met him in real life, he would probably come across as very kind of friendly, very helpful. Like these are the type of people, and this is also like first impression sometimes without even talking to them. This is the kind of Cancer rising is the type of person that like when you're in like I don't know out in the street and you're lost and you're looking for someone to help you with directions, and you just kind of like look at some people unconsciously, you're kind of scanning people's faces to see who looks friendly. Cancer rising tends to be one of the signs that people go to for that type of stuff. It can also be a sign where people tend to feel really comfortable around Cancer risings because they have this like just really comfortable, nurturing, emotionally intelligent vibe. Okay, the sign of Cancer can also be linked to like motherhood as well, so they might feel like comforted, reassured, all those types of things, which is why a lot of people just really love the aura of the Cancer rising. So Cancer risings can also attract people who like open up emotionally to them like really quickly, or people even like strangers who like they're like, oh, you're so cool, like you make me feel so comfortable, like I'm having like a really, I don't know, is like let's say like a grocery cashier is like a Cancer rising, and they're like, hey, how are you? And the person's like, actually I'm not doing really good, and then they go into it, and often the Cancer rising person will be like actually empathize, right, and we're like, oh, I'm sorry you're going through that, I see you, and person will like, oh, that was really nice, they're really nice. But sometimes it can be kind of like unasked for. So there can need to be boundaries around this as well. But yes, and Cancer is usually more of like a feminine sign. So because like the rising sign does rule kind of like the appearance and first impression, they can look like their bodies as well can look kind of like soft and warm and yes. And so men who have Cancer rising uh, typically don't come across as intimidating or anything like that. Like, yeah. hmm So they might not have like the stereotypically masculine look, which we know is not his case. With the Libra sun as well, okay? The Libra, and something I want to point out here, Libra and Gemini, which are both really important signs for him. And as you can see from Libra here, like he has other stuff going on in Libra. So again, prominent sign for him and his personality and his energy as a person. But both of these signs, Libra and uh, Gemini, are two of the three signs of the zodiac that speak of duality. The third one is Pisces, okay, because Libra, you have the scales, right? And it's about balance. And Gemini, you have the archetype of the twins, right? So here we see there's a lot of duality within him. And that is like a core part of his identity. And something else that is a core part of his identity is the idea and the concept of fluidity. He probably feels very fluid about who he is. He probably feels that he is very, very adaptable to other people. He might even feel, especially with like, yeah, Cancer risings and then like Neptune in the seventh house, like he might even feel sometimes that like, oh, I don't know who I am because every time I'm with someone different, I just kind of adapt to their personality, or I can kind of get along with everyone naturally and I'm not even doing it consciously, it just happens. So that can cause struggles about fully knowing who you are, especially as we see here, you have like Neptune making a square, which is a challenging aspect to the sun. Okay, the sun represents our identity, who we define ourselves at, who we think that we are, um, and our sense of individuality, all those types of things. Okay, our ego as well. So that could be a challenge. And I do want to say, like signs like Libra and the moon in the 12th house is a very like emotional sponge for things in general. It's a very like I'm very and Cancer rising tends to be attuned to people's needs as well. And yeah, they're all placements that all three of them that can kind of point to like I'm very good at connecting with people. I love connecting with people. I can balance them out really well. I can get along with anyone. I care a lot about people's feelings. I'm very empathetic. I'm very like, I go towards other people and other people come to me. And I'm emotionally intelligent. But at the same time, what can end up happening with something like this is I don't know who I am, or I don't know who I am when I am alone or when I'm not reflecting anyone else, or it's difficult for me to have a strong sense of self because I'm around people all the time, or I'm very exhausted because I kind of have a lot of people tell me about their problems and the things they're struggling with. And I am, even when people don't tell me about their problems or their difficult emotions, I sense them spiritually, energetically, I pick up on them and I kind of absorb all of it. And that can be really draining, even if they mean well, and even if I'm not upset at them for telling me about their feelings. Okay. So that could be something that is happening for him here. And usually, what I would recommend for someone who has placements like this is to spend time alone, which I don't know how much of that he gets, partly because of his job, right? And I think now the members have like moved into their own places, but for a long time they lived together, right? So again, yeah, so that is some I don't know how he feels about that personally, of course, but like if he feels very exhausted or very kind of like that, like spending time alone can be a good thing because that's when you can kind of process um everything that has happened, okay, throughout the day or throughout however long period of time, and you can kind of reconnect like, oh, this is who I am and this is how I'm feeling without like all of the like input and stimulation from other people incoming. Okay. All right. Yes. So this explains his kind of like with Jimin, there's kind of like everyone loves him, right? That's kind of because of this. Okay. But obviously there's other things. Um, what else do I want to talk about next? Oh, okay. Let's talk about something that's going to be very contrasting to this. Let's talk about the Mars Pluto conjunction here. in late Scorpio degrees. Okay, so the thing about Jimin is that even though he is a very kind person, he really cares about people. He comes across really soft and sympathetic and maybe even shy. Uh, Cancer rising is a sign that can come across as shy and more introverted in general. Okay. Um, this aspect, this placement is like, Park Jimin is not someone you want to fuck with. Sorry for cursing, okay? But this aspect is like one of the most powerful aspects that you can have in astrology, and it is in the sign of Scorpio. Both Mars and Pluto are at home in the sign of Scorpio, meaning that there is a very like harmonious flowing energy with these placements, okay? And so he has this kind of people who have this aspect tend to be more aware and more connected to their primal side, okay, in all senses of the word. And sometimes they repress it, okay, because it can be scary, it can be really kind of intense energy to feel a lot. um, but genuinely they are more in tune with that, and they are meant to be more in tune uh, with that as well. You know, learning to kind of navigate this aspect and cope with it can be challenging. Okay, this is an aspect that's like can be both really helpful and really challenging at different moments in your life. Okay, it just kind of is. That's how the conjunction works. They're both really intense energies. Okay, so this is a placement of someone who is like a very good tactician, someone who's very cunning, who's very, very, very intelligent, who can tell when someone is lying, when someone is trying to be shady, when someone is trying to manipulate them, when someone is trying to do something that's not right, and who's able to kind of very good, very strategic personality, very, very determined and ambitious. This is the type of person who can kind of achieve anything and can kind of come back from anything as well. It's a very, very resilient aspect. Okay, if something really difficult happens to them, this is kind of like a strong, strong, strong survival and resilience with this aspect. And yes, very ambitious. They often kind of want to have it all, and they will work for it. And so they can tend to have intimidating aura because of this, okay? And also we know, I think some of us know at this point that like he can be like this, that he has the energy, he has the power, because this is about the inner power as well. This is also a placement that like you don't want to piss off this person, because if they get pissed off, they can really go off. And you know, this with the other placements in his chart, like he can be very empathetic, right? And Libra Sun, and Mercury, and then Gemini Moon. Those are all aspects and placements that like he's able to see everyone's perspective, everyone's side in an argument, which may make him more understanding. Okay, and I think that he also just, from what I know of him, I think he just chooses to be kind and empathetic as often as possible. But this is like, if he gets mad, you don't want to be there. You don't want to be in his way when that happens, because it can be really intense. Um, yeah. Yes. So it's kind of like a contrasting thing, right? Because I said that can kind of give off an intimidating aura. But then earlier I was like, oh, you know, Cancer rising, like a very soft and welcoming aura. So what does that mean? And you know, that's the beauty of astrology, is that we're all so complex, that we have a bunch of different things going on that kind of show up at different situations, or that are kind of work together in different ways, right? And that's why it's great to get a reading from an actual astrologer, from me or someone else, instead of just Googling every single aspect. Because if you just Google, like if this is like your chart and you're Googling, what does Cancer rising mean? And then after that, what does Mars and Scorpio mean? You're gonna be like, oh, they seem very different. Like, how does that work together? They do, okay, and that's also depends on how they work together. It also just depends on like what we're observing about how the person is living their life. And if I have a client in front of me, I can ask them like, how do you feel that this shows up together in your life? And I can get confirmations like that and insight, but obviously that's not what we're doing. But I first of all, I want to say that this conjunction here is in the fifth house, okay? And this is houses in astrology represent different areas of our life. And so when we look at a planet in a certain house, they can tell us in what type of situation this part of our personality comes to the forefront. It's not that it's not there otherwise, but it's not really like if you think of yourself of like as like having many different parts of your personality that have different functions, different roles, and different needs, different traits, like when you are in certain areas of your life and which house is activated, that's like, or which situation is happening to you, that's like this planet comes up to the forefront, this part of you comes to the forefront, etc. So that's kind of how houses work, but you're obviously always all of them together. And the fifth house is the house of fun. It's the house of self-expression. It's a very artistic and creative house. So because of that, and of course knowing that he is a performer, he is an artist professionally, this side of him, this energy will more so come out when he's doing things like performing and like creatively expressing himself. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because like when we like see him in like interviews, usually he's going to be more maybe shy and bubbly, which is like the Cancer rising energy. But then when he's on stage, he can be very, very intense and very powerful and, you know, very sexy as well, because this placement is also about sex appeal, and these people tend to have a lot of it and a strong sense of their sexuality. Okay. But yes, but this house is also about having fun. So it's also about like things like gambling and things like that. Okay, if he could be like a really good, like if he gambled or anything like that, I don't know if he does or whatever, but he could be really good at that. Okay, or he can be really, really strategic when it comes to playing even like board games. He could like, you know, it could be like you meet, if you meet him in real life, it's like, oh, he's so sweet and, you know, so calm and blah, and then like you play like, I don't know, Monopoly, and he's like, I will destroy you. It can be something like that, okay? And you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Here, that's where it comes from, okay? The other thing, the fifth house is also about children. So if he ever has children, it could be a very transformative experience for him, and the child could be very intense. Okay. Yes. Okay. So very interesting. Yeah, I was not that surprised when I saw that. I was like, yes, he is very powerful, and that is part of the reason why he kind of is where he is now, right? Because he worked so hard for it and he believed so much in it. He wanted it so much. And I want to talk about the trine to Saturn and Pisces in the ninth house. Okay, so you see the blue line here between Mars and Pluto here, and then Saturn here, which is in Pisces in the ninth house. So this is kind of like, this is a really, really supportive aspect, okay? And again, kind of shows why he has been able, obviously it's not just like, oh, he's so good at everything because his birth chart says so. Like, no, you can have hints of like your gifts or blessings or things that you're naturally good at with your birth chart. But of course, like he's also where he's at because he decided to use that potential and to free will and put the hard work into it, of course. But it was kind of written in his birth chart that he could do great things and he could like achieve like high status and all those types of things. So we've talked about the conjunction of Mars and Pluto, so you know what that means. And then the trine to Saturn, okay? The trine is an aspect that happens between signs of the same element, which we see here because Mars and Pluto are in Scorpio and Saturn is in Pisces, and they're both water signs, okay? And the trine is a supportive aspect that shows harmony between different planets, okay, or different sides of the chart. It's not always 100% good, Okay, like there is nuance with that too. But what's really great about this placement uh, here, this aspect, is that with the Mars Pluto, he has this ambition and this power and this inner strength to achieve things and to express himself creatively, right? And then with the trine to Saturn, there is like a natural uh, ability to plan things out and to be kind of serious about things, to be realistic, to work hard and not just kind of work hard in the moment and then not do anything about it. Okay, because some people could have like Mars conjunct Pluto and they still all have that power and that energy, but like the way it's aspected, or it's in a different sign or a different house, and it's kind of like, oh, in the moment they have like a lot of energy and then they kind of give up or something like that. And that is not the case because it's in Scorpio, and also because there's a trine to Saturn here. Saturn speaks of longevity, of mastery, of achievement, of having a solid foundation. Okay, and that's what we see with this trine here. So I think that's really, really beautiful, and that must be like really supportive for him and his career and his artistic creation. Although I will say that Saturn can bring a bit of a heaviness here. Okay, Saturn can bring a bit of a heaviness in general, because that's kind of the nature of Saturn. And he could also feel like and because like Mars and Pluto are really intense and Scorpio intense energies, he could kind of feel like, oh, sometimes I wish I could just, if we take like music, for example, sometimes I wish I could just make a song or create something that it was just like a happy, simple song and that was it. But then with this energy, it's like, no, it always has to, or maybe I wish sometimes I could perform and it could just be like just a performance and nothing more than that. But no, with this stuff in the chart here, it's like every time it is like soul shattering, soul consuming. It comes from like the deepest depth of his soul and of his primal instincts and of his power. And he puts so much energy into it. He cares so much about it. And it always has to mean something. It always has to be for a greater purpose. It always has to like be planned out and be like serious and be like through hard work. It can't just be simple. So that could also be something that he feels that is like a bit more challenging or not as fun. Like if someone else could have a different placement where it's like there's a suggestion towards artistic ability, but it's like, it's like you just make a random pop song with like cute lyrics that people are like, oh yeah, nice, and go on with their day. And it's just simple and it can feel lighthearted. This is like, no, like you don't create stuff that's just lighthearted, and you don't feel lighthearted about it ever. Okay, so where else do we go next? This is what's fun about charts, is there's so many things to explore. Yeah. So I want to mention here about the descendant. So the DC that you see here at 12 degrees. Okay, the numbers are the degrees. Okay. The descendant here is in Capricorn. And that's because the descendant and the ascendant are an axis. Okay. So whichever sign that you have your ascendant in, you will always have your descendant in the exact opposite sign. So we already knew he had a Capricorn descendant because we knew he had Cancer rising. Okay, so every single Cancer rising has a Capricorn descendant, and vice versa. Every single Capricorn rising has a Cancer descendant. But okay, so we talked about the ascendant already, what it means, right? It's like who it also like who we identify as, who we come across as, like the self. The first, it starts off the first house, and the first house is the house of self. And it's also what's conscious about who we are, how we consciously view ourselves, and what we know about like how other people view us. Okay, it's more like to the forefront of our understanding of ourselves, whereas the descendant is kind of like can represent our shadow side. It can represent things that we're not as aware of, and it can represent like the ascendant. Usually the sign that we have our ascendant in, we usually identify with it. Like when we read about it, we're like, yes, that is us, that's me, I recognize myself in these traits. But the descendant, if we read about it, we're like, I don't really relate to this. It depends on each person, of course, but we feel like we don't necessarily have those qualities and those traits, but we actually do. We do as well, okay? But we don't necessarily identify with these things. And when we don't identify with these things, what ends up happening is we project that energy on other people, which is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? But our descendant sign is a sign that we tend to naturally attract all the time. Okay, so you can look into that as well. Whatever your ascendant sign is, what is the exact opposite sign, the sign of your descendant, and you will probably find like, oh yeah, I have a bunch of friends with this sign. I have a bunch of people in my family with this sign. I attract people with placements in this sign romantically all the time. Okay, that's kind of true for everyone. So the sign that he attracts is Capricorn. Okay, and the descendant sign, we can feel all types of way about our descendant sign. Some people don't like their descendant sign and they're like, oh, I always attract this sign, I don't like it, or I've had bad experiences, whatever. When that happens, I personally think people who don't like their descendant sign is because they're not facing their shadow. And so the people of their descendant sign that they're attracting are showing up with like an unhealthy um expression of that sign, but it's because it's mirroring to them and it's like, look at your shadow, look at your patterns, confront certain things. But anyway, some people feel pretty neutral about their descendant sign. Some people like it. Like they're going to be like, oh yeah, I know I get along with the sign. I love them. I love that I attract them. We don't know how he feels personally about it. We don't know if he even knows about this. But he attracts Capricorn and he is naturally attracted to people with either Capricorn placements or Capricorn energy. And we know who has a Capricorn sun, right? We know that Taehyung is a Capricorn sun. So that is like very sweet, right? That is something I did want to mention that you probably were thinking about already. So that kind of also explains why there's a kind of a natural uh, drawn to each other kind of thing with this placement. And of course they're born the same year, so they have the same Jupiter and Saturn signs as well. Um, but yeah, and I think if I remember well with the birth time that I have for Taehyung, I think that he is a Sagittarius rising, and that would mean that he would have a Gemini descendant, and Jimin has his moon in Gemini, which again is kind of like a sign that like when we meet people who have their moon or their sun or maybe Venus in the sign of our seventh house, we tend to kind of gravitate towards them naturally and get along with them. So yeah, very sweet there. But what this means for Jimin here having Capricorn descendant besides Taehyung is that in terms of relationship, he probably, and especially if we look, the other relationship planets are like Venus and Mars, which are both in Scorpio, okay? In terms of romantic relationships, he probably seeks serious long-term partnerships rather than just non-serious business or whatever. Okay, this is a sign that usually wants to get married to someone and kind of spend their life with them. I also would think that this is someone who is monogamous as well. I guess this is kind of personal, but you know, um I mean, Uranus in the seventh house, maybe not, but whatever. But this is usually someone, and the descendant rules all types of relationships. So even in terms of friendships, even of right, all types of relationships, people with Cancer rising because of their Capricorn descendant tend to have like maybe like a small inner circle of people that they've known for a really, really long time, that they're really close with, that they've put a lot of work into their relationships. Because that's the other thing with Cancer rising is that they tend to put a lot of work into their relationships because that's what Capricorn represents. And so to them, if they meet people who take things like not really seriously or who don't care about them or who don't make time for them, like that can be kind of hurtful. That can be just kind of confusing because like that is just like natural for them to do as Cancer risings, is to care a lot and put a lot of effort and work into the relationship to make it happen. Okay, this is not a sign that is like surprised at the fact that, like, oh, if you have a long-term relationship, you have to invest into it, and sometimes there's issues and you have to put effort, like, they know. Okay. um yeah, so this is a placement of someone who values kind of long lasting bonds. Okay. um this can also be a sign that, like, it can be difficult to have certain relationships because of that. Okay, because Capricorn is, as a sign, is ruled by Saturn. And as we said, Saturn is about hard work, right? And Saturn is also about time, and it can speak of things taking a long time. So it can take people, like, people with this placement might, like, uh, find, like, their person later in life, or they might be single for a long time or in a relationship for a long time, like, all kinds of things. Okay, but things like that. So, and him having, like, moon, yeah, moon in Gemini and sun in Libra, he loves to connect with people. Okay, in all types of ways. But he could be the type of person that really wants a relationship, and sometimes it might be challenging. Obviously, we have no idea what's going on with that for him, so we're going to leave it there. But yes, wanted to mention that. um with Neptune and Uranus in the seventh house of relationships again. Um, First of all, these are generational planets. Okay, so pretty much most millennials have Neptune and Uranus in Capricorn. Um, but it is unique to him that he has them in the seventh house because that is the rising sign. Okay, so this is an interesting energy because this is an energy of wanting, like, he probably experiences spiritual connections with people really deep. That's what Neptune is about. And Uranus is about more unconventional connections. And actually, like, I kind of with Uranus in the seventh house, you're like, they're both like collective planets, right? And I kind of see this how, like, it could explain also, like, the fact that he is in a position, because of his job, of being someone who, like, has a lot of fans and has this kind of unconventional, weird type of relationship that most people don't have. Obviously, not like romantically, but right. So having, like, one person in relationship with a collective of multiple people, which is kind of what a fandom is, right? It's kind of weird when you think about it. And 99% of the world will never experience that, but that is part of his experience, and you can see it here. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what else do I want to talk about? Oh, let's talk about Mercury conjunct Chiron. Okay, so he has Mercury in Libra here. This is Mercury, and then the asteroid Chiron. Okay, I'm not going to go too into Chiron. But Mercury is about our self-expression, our communication, our cognitive processing, how we express ourselves, what we want, how we think, all those types of things. Okay, and Mercury in Libra is a very, it's a very, like, good placement for Mercury, I would say. I mean, again, astrology is more nuanced than good or bad, but, like, uh, people with Mercury and Libra are very diplomatic communicators. Okay, they're very skilled at understanding, picking up on social cues, and as we said, kind of adapting to everyone. Okay, people with Mercury and Libra can make really great diplomats, can make really great people who work in, like, international affairs and business, or politicians as well. That can be a great placement for them because they're really good at kind of, like, considering a lot of things, seeing a lot of point of views, and being kind and considerate of people. I think Namjoon also has this placement. We're going to get into that when we read his chart, if that's something that you guys want me to do, like the reading the charts of the other members. I want to do that as well, but I'll talk about it again at the end. But yes, Mercury and Libra. Libra is also a very artistic sign. So when it comes to Mercury and Libra, yes, that can be someone who has a beautiful voice. And with Chiron in conjunction to Mercury here, we see that this is where we see his insecurities about his voice. that we know of, right? That he often feels that he's very hard on himself, that he often feels like his singing is not good enough, or right, that's kind of like a recurring struggle with him. He has talked about it. We do know about this, which is why I'm talking about it. And Chiron definitely speaks of that. And that might be kind of like an underlying thought that remains forever, okay? Like Chiron is kind of like the wound that never heals. But the other thing about Chiron is this is this can also be a really, really healing placement both for us and for other people. So for him, using his voice, both in terms of like singing and maybe like speaking his truth of like his personal opinions and what matters to him, things like that, right? Can be a really, really healing experience for him, right? That's probably why he loves singing so much. And also, like, his voice is just so healing to anyone who listens to him. So even though he might be kind of uh, self-conscious about it, thinking that it's not good enough, most people are like, but your voice is just, it literally heals my heart when I listen to you singing. And I think a lot of us feel that way. And you can definitely see this here. And it's just really, really beautiful. So yeah, see, that's another great thing about knowing your astrology is that if he knew that, he would know that. Okay. What else? What else? What else? Mm, let's talk about Saturn in the ninth house. Yes, Saturn and Pisces in the ninth house on its own, not just like not an aspect to any other thing. So Saturn is represents in our natal chart, Saturn represents our toughest lessons. Okay, it's kind of like the area in our life where we always have to be on top of things. Otherwise, Saturn always comes knock on our door and be like, hey, I'm going to annoy you right now because I think you should work harder. I think you should do more. I think you should be more on top of your stuff. So whichever sign and house that Saturn is in our natal charts, and we all have this, of course, different, and we all have Saturn somewhere in our chart, it can be something that we see as really difficult. We have to work really hard for more than most people. And the ninth house represents our belief systems. Represents our belief systems. It represents higher education. It represents philosophy. It represents spiritual and religious beliefs. It represents traveling as well. Okay. And Pisces is a sign that is a very spiritual sign. It's a sign that's very like connected to the collective, kind of spiritually, emotionally. It is a sign that is very kind of humanitarian and really cares about people, wants to make the world a better place. It's a very artistic, spiritual, healing sign. Can be connected to religion as well. So here we do see, and Pisces is connected to arts as well, a very artistic sign, as I said, and it is especially connected to dancing. So we do see and hear the fact that like it takes in his life, he's not a type of situation where he can easily get into like a group where he can dance, right? That's just not how South Korea is, and that's not the path that he chose, right? This is something that he has had to work hard on, really, really hard. And Saturn, there's nothing glorious about Saturn. It's really just plain old hard work sometimes, and it's just like showing up every day, just showing up, doing the thing, doing it again until I master my craft. Because that is the thing about Saturn. You know, some people are like, oh, when they learn just a little bit about astrology, they're like, oh, Saturn is so bad. I hate Saturn. But it's like the reason why Saturn is like putting so much pressure and constraints on you when you feel so pressured in the area of life that Saturn is in is because Saturn wants you to become your best version of yourself. And Saturn is about mastery and achievement and accomplishment when you really, really work hard for it. And when you're diligent and disciplined, that's what Saturn is about, discipline, okay, and long-term planning, okay? So he had to work really hard for it. He had to show up continuously. He had to have discipline and for a long time as well. And he still does work really hard and improve his craft continuously. We see that in Saturn and Pisces here for him. And we see that and we also talked about that a little bit with the trine to Mars and Pluto, right? But Saturn in the ninth house, it could be it could be difficult for him to travel as much as he does. That's a really interesting placement for me to see for someone who travels as much as he does, obviously for his work mostly. It could be something that takes a toll on him, or it could be something like with Saturn and Pisces here, it could be something like he really has to take the time to, I don't know, learn a couple phrases in each language every time he goes somewhere new, or learn a bit about the culture. Or it can be something like that, because if he doesn't, like, he gets some kind of backlash, not necessarily like online, but just like something happens like in real life, or he just feels like he has to. It can be something like that. um Possibly. That's not really something that we can know unless like he was here and we asked him about it. um Yeah. Something else that this shows for me is that Saturn also represents the father in our natal chart, or father figures, also just authority figures in general in our lives. Okay. So, his father might have also been involved with music or arts or spirituality in some way. His father might have been really religious, is something that comes up as well, potentially with this placement. And that could be something that is kind of because we have this in the house of beliefs and religion, right? So that could be something. Um, I don't know if he is religious. I don't know if he's ever mentioned it. Obviously, he doesn't have to, because that can be more private. But if he is religious, he could be very uh, it's like really important for him, and really kind of uh, keeping up with it, and really abiding to the rules of whatever that religion is. um, because his father might have been like that, or he might have been raised in an environment like that. He might be surrounded by people who tell him, like, you have to be more disciplined around your beliefs, your spirituality, or you have to follow the rules of this, right? Sometimes it can be healthy, sometimes it can be unhealthy with Saturn. But yeah, that could just be something that shows up for him. um and the thing is, he has his Saturn return kind of upcoming kind of soon, and what, like 2 years, something like that. What a return is, for those of you who don't know, a return speaks of the moment when a planet, like where it is currently in the sky, comes back at the same spot that it was in when we were born. And when that happens, the themes, it's kind of like the end of a cycle, the start of a new one, and the themes of that placement in our birth chart are especially highlighted and come up to the surface. Um, and some planets, we don't really talk much about their returns. Like, for example, like the moon, we don't really talk about the lunar return because it happens every month. But different planets move at different paces, and Saturn returns every 29-ish years. So every single person has their Saturn return between the ages of like 28 to 30 years old, and then like in mid 50s, almost 60 years old, and then if you live that old, 80 something years old, almost 90. Okay. Um, yeah. And a note on the Saturn return, and Saturn return, because of that, is often a moment when it can be really challenging. It shows up very differently for each person, of course, but it can be a very challenging moment, because it's kind of a moment where it's like, okay, get your ish together now. That's kind of like how Saturn is. And like, you're going to feel internally, and maybe from people around you, this kind of pressure of like, figure things out, have a plan for your life. Who are you now? Are you responsible? Are you independent? And all the themes that are concerned with your particular Saturn sign, like we talked about, and we're going to continue to talk about with Saturn and Pisces here. So yeah, so the older members of BTS have gone through, or are going through, their Saturn return right now. Okay, or have gone through it like recently. We're going to look at the exact like kind of days and transits when we get to them. But then the younger members haven't gone through it yet, but they will within a couple of years. So him, it's going to be about 2-ish years. Okay, because Saturn spends 2.5 years in every sign, and Saturn is currently in Aquarius, so it will be in Pisces next. Okay, it's going to enter Pisces in March 2023, but it's not going to touch his Saturn just yet. Okay, his Saturn is more like late Pisces, but anyway. Yeah, and what I find really interesting, side note on like Saturn returns, I find it so fascinating for me that like there's the whole like military thing for men in South Korea, and that like the limits and time that you can do it is like the age of your Saturn return. Because that's a very kind of Saturn return energy to have to do. And that's kind of like the thing. Saturn speaks of like when you have certain Saturn transits, you might have situations in your life that show that it's like you have to take responsibility, or you have to like work hard on the thing that like is not pleasant for you. Right. So that is, I was like, when I realized that, I was like, oh, that's so crazy. And it's like most people don't even know about this because they don't know about astrology. But anyway, as we said earlier, astrology speaks of human and humanity, right? And when we have certain transits, they impact us. They can kind of give us hints or what might show up, but it's not 100% deterministic of like what will happen to you with 100% certainty. But themes that might come up for him during his Saturn return are if he's not 100% sure about what his personal beliefs are, his personal beliefs, not his father's, not his family's, not what other people tell him he should believe in. If he doesn't know yet what his beliefs are, he will feel a strong pressure to define that and clarify that. And that might all happen internally. It could just be like an internal pressure and he could figure all that out internally and not talk about it. Or it could happen publicly. Who knows? Okay. But those are themes that might come up for him. If there's any type of like religious issues, or he might kind of speak up about political issues or humanitarian issues, he might feel called to do so because he feels like he has a responsibility to do that and to speak up about what he believes in. That could be that as well. As we said, Saturn can speak of restriction. And Saturn in his chart is in the ninth house of travel. So obviously we don't know yet if BTS will have to do their military service, and if yes, if they're going to do it. But that can be a sign here that it's like, oh, for during your Saturn return, like you are being kind of restricted by this energy that's like you can't travel much, and that can be challenging as well. Yeah, and he could just kind of reach another level of mastery with his craft. There's all types of things that might come up here. Okay. Um, yeah, and then the last thing I want to talk about is his north node. Okay, the north node is right here, pretty close to the sun. Okay, it is in Libra, 26 degrees, and the fourth house. And the north node, it's a mathematical point. Okay, first of all, it's not like a real planetary body or a planet, which is why you might have not have heard of it before. It's simply a mathematical point. But in astrology, it represents kind of our life purpose and or life path and what we're meant to accomplish. Okay, it's a very beautiful energy. It's a very kind of karmic energy, but not karmic in like the in a bad way, right? Not like, oh, get your karma, like. um yeah, but it kind of speaks of like when the thing is, and again, astrology doesn't tell you like you have to do this with your life. It's more like if you don't follow your north node, the energy of your north node, you're probably gonna not going to feel fulfilled. Okay. And the north node in Libra in the fourth house, this is for him about creating, nurturing, and uh like emotionally close and true authentic bonds and relationship with other people. This is like his life purpose, to connect with people on that deep level, to have people around him who feel like family, who he makes feel family to them, to him. And so we kind of see that with the BTS members, right? And that's really beautiful. That's probably really nourishing and fulfilling for him. It can also speak of like actual biological family, right? So he could be called to, or he could naturally feel really close to his family. He could feel called to really kind of spend time with them and take care of them. But it can also be like whatever family means to him. It can be chosen family. It can be like maybe one day he's going to have a partner and have kids, right? And it will bring him a lot of happiness to focus on that. Maybe it is part of his life purpose to have kids, or right, something like that. Yeah, and it's also Northern in Libra also speaks of like learning to take everyone's perspective into account. And he obviously, we talked about this already, he has other placements in his chart that kind of facilitate that, because someone else might have like Northern in Libra and be guided to do this and learn how to do this, but they have a bunch of other placements in their chart that show more that they're a type of person naturally who will be more introspective about their own feelings and not necessarily understand other people, or be really kind of set in their ways about their opinions. And if that type of person has North Node in Libra, then that could be more challenging for them to be in their North Node. But I don't think it would be that challenging for someone like Jimin because of all the other placements and what we know about him, what we talked about earlier. Yes. Hmm. But as we see as well, like it does make a square to an exact square, right? They're both 26 degrees, if you can see, to Uranus in the seventh house. And so Uranus, what I didn't mention earlier is that Uranus also speaks of, it rules things like thunder and electricity. And so Uranus also is about unexpected and sudden changes in our lives. And so with him having this planet in his seventh house of relationships, it can mean that like in his life, sometimes he meets people like out of the blue and it feels like it's just fated and they just naturally connect. But then it can also be something like, I've been friends with this person for a while and then suddenly like it just ends. Like without my control, or something unexpected happens, or it can be kind of chaotic because of this. And that can be challenging for him. That can create kind of inner tension, okay, with the Northern in Libra here, and especially like Northern in the fourth house. Fourth house is a house that's like really about more like the private life, okay, and I know that's kind of an interesting North Node for him because he has such a private persona in life and job, but actually he feels most fulfilled when he's kind of like with his people privately. That's the thing. So that's important for him to kind of value and make sure that he puts energy and time into that. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here. I think I've been going on for a while. I don't know how long. Um, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can let me know by liking this video if you haven't already. Leave me a comment to tell me your thoughts, to if you want to ask me any questions about his chart, about things that maybe I haven't touched upon, or things that maybe I said that were kind of confusing. I can kind of get into a flow when I talk about astrology and just kind of spit out a bunch of things. So if there's something you want me to clarify or you want me to kind of look into, I can do that. I am open to, I would like to kind of do similar videos like this about the charts of the other members as well. So if if enough people find this video and enjoy it and tell me that they want to, I will make them. Let me know which member specifically you would like me to get to next, okay? Like if enough people like this, I will make all of them, but I'll let you guide me as to who you think I should do after this. I'm also open. I would like to maybe eventually, like, if I do all the members of the group, like maybe I do other celebrities as well. Not necessarily K-pop, just kind of anyone, maybe even like things like historical figures, or kind of anyone that I might be interested in their chart. So if you have like anyone, even who's like not BTS or K-pop related, that you think you would be interesting that I look into their chart, you would like me to read their chart, let me know in the comments as well, and I'll take it in. I'll take note of it, and maybe I'll do them eventually. I don't know when, but eventually. If you want me to read your chart next, I can do that. Okay, I do private readings. Okay, readings like this of your natal charts. I also do different types of readings, and as I said earlier, I'm also a tarot reader and a life coach. So you can also book that with me if you're interested. The link to book that will be in my description box of the video down below. If you'd like to tip me or donate to the channel, that's very appreciated. There is a link for that down below as well. But even just watching and spending time with me here, I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say. Thank you for being here. I love you all. I love BTS. You love BTS as well. So was glad that we spent time talking about this. And let me know if this was like your first time with astrology and you're kind of just finding out about it as well. I'm kind of curious about that, or maybe you didn't think that astrology was really legit. I don't know. Just always just have fun in the comment section. Stay respectful. Love you all, and I will see you next time. Subscribe to the channel. Oh my God, subscribe to the channel if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on the future videos of the other members. I'm kind of like 99% sure I'm going to do them, but as I kind of want to see if like how many people watch this and are into it as well. But like I do want to do them. Yes, mostly on my channel in the past I've done like tarot readings, which I will continue doing, but I also want to start doing these kind of longer astrology type videos, starting with BTS members. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe to the channel. Welcome to the family. Love you and have a good day or great night. Bye.